Hello, my name is Andy Schwertman. This is my friend Bill Thompson. The way that I know him is we've known each other for quite a while.
How old are you?
I just turned 30 in May.
Okay. I've known you for 30 years.
Okay, that's creepy. What was your first concert?
My first concert, I believe, I saw a lot of shows. I grew up in Piqua, Ohio,
Yes.
which is on the way to your mother's hometown of
Delphus.
Delphus. That's correct, up 75. And so I would go to shows in Dayton, Ohio, a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So the first big concert I remember that I went to, I think I was in 7th or 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
I went to see the Rolling Stones, who played at Hara Arena,
Nice.
which was pretty nice. The one that I remember in high school that really set me on my concert-going path was Steppenwolf.
Oh, nice.
And I came out of that thinking, you know, this is the greatest thing in the world.
What did you listen to growing up in Piqua?
This was the aha moment. I was in the 7th grade when the Beatles were on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Nice.
For the first time.
Nice.
So literally my life changed that next day. I didn't have much hair, but what I had, I combed down across my forehead when I went to school the next day, as did all my buddies in Piqua, Ohio.
Right.
So I came of age when literally the golden age of radio, where it would be the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, all the British invasion bands, along with Motown and Stax and pop music, Gary Lewis and the Playboys, Sam and Dave, the Four Tops, the Supremes. I listened to everything. And by the time I got to college, I was a rock fan and did that. But I've always loved soul music. I've always loved R&B. Over the past maybe 20 years, 22, 23 years, I was never a big country music fan, but what I liked was the kind of country rock of the Byrds, of maybe the Eagles, but of bands like
Yes.
the Flying Burrito Brothers and Poco.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can tell you where I really took a hard turn was in 1995 when Emmylou Harris released an album called Wrecking Ball.
Mm-hmm.
And that did it. I was on the Americana train after that.
Okay.
So Emmylou Harris, Lucinda Williams, Steve Earle, all that leads into Jason Isbell and Parker Millsap.
Okay.
And people like that.
Nice. Okay. What music do you listen to here at home?
I usually listen to, what's interesting these days, Andy, is that I will immerse myself in whoever I'm getting ready to talk to. Before I wrote the story about Parker Millsap, I listened to his albums over and over again. He has two.
Yes.
This Friday I'll have a story about Jason Isbell, who is coming to, oh no, there's my phone. Let me, hopefully Dylan will be able to edit this out.
Nice ringtone.
And so that's my favorite song.
Nice.
Give Me Shelter is my
Nice.
ringtone.
Nice.
It's also my favorite song.
Nice.
So that's what I do. So whoever I'm writing about, I listen to them almost constantly
Mm-hmm.
before I either talk to them or while I'm getting ready to write the story and things like that.
How did you come up with the name for your radio show, Blue Notes and Banjos?
Blue Snakes and
Blue
Banjos.
Snakes and Banjos.
Right.
I'm sorry. Forgive me.
You're fine. Again, it goes back to the Inquirer.
Okay.
My friend Bob Hust, who worked there in the early 1980s, came back to town and created the radio show. He called me and said he needed a partner. Would I be willing to do it? And I said I'd be delighted to do it. He said, I don't have a name for it. Think about it overnight. And I said, okay. And he called me the next day. This was about 3 days before the first show.
Uh-huh.
And he said, I had a dream last night, and the dream said the name of the show was Blue Snakes and Banjos. And since we were only 3 days away That's the name we went with.
Right. Okay.
So there was nothing but a dream in Bob Hust's head
Okay.
that came up with the name of the show.
Okay, that's cool. Favorite concert?
My favorite concert. Wow. I can tell you my favorite album.
Okay.
I can tell you my favorite song.
Okay.
I don't know if I can tell you my favorite concert. So here's how I'll answer that.
All right.
Since I've been doing the radio show for the past 3 years,
Mhm.
each year I pick my favorite concert.
Okay.
So for 2016 and 2015, it was a guy from Oklahoma, kind of a blues folk singer named Parker Millsap,
Okay.
and just a little trio or a quartet when he added a drummer.
Mm-hmm.
That was 2 times. In 2015, I saw him at the Southgate House. Last summer, I saw him at this festival, barbecue festival, over in Batesville, Indiana, and he was the best show I saw each of those years. Friday night, he came back to the Southgate House just this past Friday night, and he was awesome again. So instead of racking my brain for hours, I will say Parker Millsap is my favorite concert persona right now.
Nice. If there was a Bill Thompson theme song, what would it be?
I'm going to ask you this since you just heard my phone ring.
Okay.
What would you think it would be?
Oh, man.
It's Gimme Shelter.
Yes, that's it. That's it. That's it.
That song, Let It Bleed, came
Uh-huh.
out in the summer that after I graduated from high school, before I went to college.
Oh, okay.
And we drove around the back roads of Miami County, Ohio, every single night, listening to Let It Bleed on probably an 8-track player in
Oh,
the car
wow. Okay.
at that time, to the point of, where each note of that record is deeply ingrained in my brain.
Okay.
Gimme Shelter has there's, the Mary Clayton chorus in that, the unmistakable guitar lead-in of that is indeed, that would be the theme song, and everything else takes off from there.
Okay.
We talked about, and I mentioned when you asked favorite concert,
Uh-huh.
but my favorite album has always been, since it came out in 1971, has been Allman Brothers Live at the Fillmore East.
Okay. Cool.
I fell in love with the Allman Brothers, and
Mhm.
that might have been, if not the last thing that Dwayne Allman recorded, but it was when the band was still together at the top of their game. And
Yes.
as many albums as I've loved for the past 46 years, that still remained my favorite the
Nice.
whole time.
Nice.
So,
Nice.
my life in music in a nutshell.
Nice.
Which has led to, and I've been a very lucky guy, that as the newspaper business declined and they didn't have a full-time music writer, I raised my hand and said I'll do it in my free time. My buddy, who I worked with 30 years ago at the Inquirer, came back to town, did all the groundwork to get the radio show. We get to go on there for 2 hours a week and goof off and play our favorite songs and talk about them.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing better than talking to a friend of yours
Mhm.
about music and playing
No,
those
there's
records
not.
for 2 hours a week. So I'm a lucky
Right.
guy.
Right.
And I'm especially lucky to see Kate Thompson, who's a big music fan,
Yes.
Andy Schwertman, who's a big music fan, people like that that
Mhm.
you can do that with
Yes.
and talk about the kind of music that they like, and hopefully that this will just carry on to the next
Yes.
generation.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Now, is it okay if I tie something in here?
absolutely.
So I was giving Dylan a little bit of a lead-in that one of the first times that, and tell me if you remember this. This one time, I'm not sure how old I was or what year it was, but that's
Mhm.
I'm not sure about that, but I do remember one of the summers. Kate and I came over here. This is Bill's daughter that I'm talking about. Kate came over to my house and said, "Hey Andy, there is this rock and roll band called Bon Jovi, and if you haven't heard their music, you have to hear it because it's really good." So I'm thinking, and the first thing I thought of was, not to be mean, but the first thing I thought of was, yeah, shut up, get out of here. Well, she had just recorded their Crush tour from Zurich, Switzerland, and Bill, that did it.
Yeah.
That did it. I looked at her and I went, "These guys are awesome." And she goes, "I told you." So the next thing I know, we came over here. She goes, "I want to take you over to my house to listen to some of their music." So I'm like, okay. First album was Slippery When Wet. When I heard at the end of Wild in the Streets, I looked at her and I went, "These guys freaking rock." And she goes, "I told you."
8 years ago, when I was lucky enough to score an interview with Carlos Santana.
Ooh, okay.
And so his people call me, and the phone rings, and I pick up, and I figure it's going to be Carlos Santana.
Right.
And it's not. It's a guy. And the guy says, "Mr. Thompson?" I said, "Yes." "Please hold for Mr. Santana." So I have that on tape.
Oh my
And
gosh!
when I sit down and write my book about the interviews, it'll be interesting.
Nice.
I've had a great time, and some of the highlights are the people who are just as gracious, way beyond, who don't need to talk to me for a local newspaper.
Right.
And again, I'll go back to this Isbell thing right now. When I was researching this, last week he was on Colbert, he was on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah, and he was on CBS Saturday morning, Saturday sessions. And I was looking at the recent number of interviews that he did for this album. There are dozens of them, from Garden and Gun magazine to the New York Times. And he was just delightful in the half hour we spent on the phone 3 weeks ago.
Nice.
And, when they call you Bill or Mr. Thompson,
Right.
then they've got me sucked in right off.
Right.
at that
Exactly.
point.
Exactly. Okay. CD or vinyl?
Well, CD. And I'll tell you that quick story. I think I have sold over the years, because I'm much older than you are,
Yes.
at least 2 vinyl collections, because I went to college in Columbus, then I moved to Florida and I bought a new stereo and bought new records, and then I moved back to Ohio, so I had to get rid of those records, and then I had cassette tapes, and then I started buying CDs in 1991, I think. And if we have time and inclination, we'll take you upstairs and show you the wall of CDs.
Okay.
When we're finished talking.
I'm sure Dylan would love to see that.
Okay, so we can add that
I'm
to
just
the deal.
saying.